Hi guys, this is the 11th episode of the Hashbrown Traveler. I'm your host Hman here. As you guys know about Iran, how it is and how as a theocratic state, how it has been, who say that it is like a pariah state and all that. But most people are also aware of the fact about its glorious past, like during the days of the monarchy and all that. So in this episode, I talk about Indian family who moved to Iran in the 70s. I'm talking about the author's father who moved to Iran for work as a doctor. So she had given me the information to tell this story. So according to her words, I'm reading it out for you guys. So she says that most people always thought Iran was mostly like this hijab-clad people and the strict Islamic interpretation in everyday lives in that country. But it was not like that back in the days, as it was ruled by an emperor who was a very westernized person, and his love for westernized culture was one of the things that Iran was very ahead of even the Gulf countries during that time. So she says that in that winter of 1975, when I moved to Iran with my parents and sister, India and Iran didn't seem so far apart. So she said that her move happened because of Indira Gandhi's 1974 visit to Iran. Iran agreed to sell oil to India cheaply. In a sweetheart deal in return, Indira agreed to send doctors and engineers to train the Iranians. My father was a pediatrician with a massive love of adventure and a correspondingly tiny bank balance, decided to go. Here she says, we began our Iranian adventure in the remote town of Karamsha, part of the Kurdish territory, famous for its bas reliefs from the time of ancient Persian king Darius. But in that cold winter, we had little time to sightsee. We arrived to a fierce, unprecedented snowstorm and a house with a collapsed roof. My mother, with 2 children under 5, had to immediately run a household on a tiny budget. Meanwhile, my father had to quickly learn both Farsi and Kurdish, treating mostly poor tribal children in a free government hospital. So, when you talk about Kurdish language, is technically related to Farsi language, what I'm referring to, because it has the same language roots. And in general, most Kurdish people have very fair skin and they have blue eyes. Some of them are Muslim, some of them Yazidis and all that. They have their own religions in that ethnicity, like that. So now she talks about how she remembers her days in Iran. Here in this, she says, my first real memory at the age of 4 is of being very cold, watching the snow fall mercilessly outside our window. There was no central heating, only an old kerosene heater for the entire house. It was snowing too hard to go out, and we had no car. So my sister read to me for hours, building a passion for reading that remains with me. There was no suitable English school, so we were homeschooled for the first year. Then we found an American teacher from Baltimore who set up a tiny school of 5 children. My sister and I formed half the student body. We had few English books and read our single copy of C.S. Lewis' The Lion, The Witch and the Wardrobe so many times that years I can still recite it by heart. So American expats were a lot in Iran back in the days because America was a very great ally for Iran at that time. So he used to purchase a lot of weapons from America, mostly like the F-14 Tomcats, fighter jets, which was needed for the Imperial Iranian Air Force. That period where Iran had a very good army, air force and navy at that time, much compared to any other country in the Middle East. So she talks now about her experiences of watching television in Iran. In this, she says that for entertainment, we watch American television dubbed in Farsi. I learned my first alphabet from watching Sesame Street. Later, I was enraptured by the kick-ass escapades of Charlie's Angels heroines America back then. While not exactly popular, was not the great Satan that Khomeini would later call it. So that time, American television was available for Iranian audiences back then because of the fact that, like how now that American media is always available now in the Middle East, and it's the most sought out thing that even every Middle Eastern person wants to see to that. And it was those days in Iran, they were very fond of American culture. And it was at that time you had like TV shows like Charlie's Angels. So maybe I think the Mary Tyler Moore Show or any of those shows which was coming in America back in the days was coming on par in Iran, I guess. I think so. That's what those days they used to have that access to American television at that time. So in this part, she says about how the Americans were there as expats in Iran. So she says, there were American teachers, engineers, missionaries in our town, even some Jewish ones. We listened to the haunting husky voice of the stunning Gugush, a popular Iranian pop singer. So for a lot of people who don't know about Gugush, is that she is a very famous Iranian pop singer. Not only she was a singer, she was an actress also. She used to appear in a lot of Iranian movies at that time. Even to this day, people still listen to Gugush a lot as it was one of those glory days of music in Iran. And the thing here is, my personal experience is that I like to listen to Gugush songs because she has an amazing voice. And even though the Farsi language is kind of a little bit understandable, but I like the way it is sung by Gugush so well. And I can give my personal experience is that I was once traveling in Uber, and it was a share car, and the person sitting next to me was an Iranian girl who was studying in college. So I wasn't aware that she was Iranian. So she put her aux cable in the stereo set and she was playing a Gugush song. So when I heard that voice and I realized, my God, it is Gugush. So immediately I just asked her, you're listening to Gugush, right? She was very amazed to know that an Indian guy knows about Gugush so well. So we had a nice talk about how much I admire Iranian culture in terms and how I like the language a lot. And she was very impressed about that. The author now talks about her everyday activity that she used to do. So she says, I remember eating fresh, still warm naan with everything, even sambar, and gorging on cherries, melons, and watermelons, as my mother grappled with managing our strictly vegetarian household. And then she says, in those days, Iranian women were the epitome of chic. The most conservative would wear a chador, headscarf, loosely tossed over their heads. The most modern, usually Tehran, would go as far as short skirts, bell bottoms, and bare shoulders. There were plenty in between wearing trousers on or long dresses. My mother, unused to wearing anything but a sari wrapped in a flimsy georgettes tightly around her midriffs, moved around with no trouble, though somewhat self-consciously. So back then, the Iranian fashion sense was very influenced from Western culture only. A lot of people used to wear miniskirts. So a lot of them used to hang around in discotheques, like you can see in this footage here. You can see that was like the party life of Iran at that point. So according to her mom, she says that I felt so unfashionable next to the Iranian women with their lipstick and high heels and French perfume, she recalls. And then now the author talks about how she moved to Zahedan. So after a couple of years, we moved to Zahedan, the desolate capital of the Balochistan province, 40 kilometers from the Pakistan border. My sister and I went to a school started by 6 soldiers who had come to Iran as a part of the British Army in the 1940s. Their descendants were everywhere, running Indian stores or working as construction workers. And now the author talks about her views on how the Shah of Iran was seen everywhere in everyday life of an Iranian. In this, she says, just like every Indian office or school had a picture of Gandhi, every Iranian one had a picture of the Emperor Muhammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. To our childish eye, the Shah was marvelous, perched on his golden Naderi throne, his glittering Pahlavi crown almost too brilliant to look at, smothered with what I have later discovered were 3,380 diamonds, not to mention the egg-size emeralds. Blissfully ignorant of politics and the royal family's increased corrupt ways, we also gaped at the stunning Empress Farah's jewels and the evening gowns. We hankered after her miniskirt, her 60s inspired eyeliner, little pillbox hats a la Jackie Onassis. In this, now the author talks about how things started to fall apart due to the revolution that was almost brewing at that point in 1978. Then all of a sudden it all came to an end. In 1978, we began to hear rumors of unrest in Tehran. There was increasing public resentment of the Shah's extravagance and his closeness to America. We were far away in rural Zahedan that it took us some time to realize that in Iran, as we knew, it was collapsing. In August 98, the Cinema Rex Theatre in Abadan was destroyed by an unknown arsonist, killing hundreds. The Shah was blamed, and this was the trigger of the revolution. Before we knew it, all flights to Tehran were cancelled. There was no way it seemed to get out of Iran. A friend of my father pulled strings and got us out in the last plane, a Pakistan Airlines flight with a layover in Karachi. Pakistan's authoritarian president Mohammad Zia-ul-Haq was in power, and we were worried that Indians might not be allowed in the country. It was not a flight we would have chosen, but eventually it got us back home. So this is the situation where the family left the country. Like Argo, the movie, like how Tony Mendes got all those guys out of the country. So like that's how the family left the country. But here she talks about how her father wanted to go back and still finish his commitment job as he was in contract. But my father had not finished his contract or received his wages. He went back to serve out his contract. By this time, Ayatollah Khomeini was in power. Everything had changed, he recalled. The streets were filled with young boys, only 15 or 16, toting machine guns. There were no women anywhere. One young boy brandishing a Kalashnikov came up to me and asked me what I thought about the change of guard. I don't think anyone, even Khomeini, ever had so enthusiastic about the revolution as I was that day. So this is in the period where the provisionary government was established after the Shah left Iran. So at that time, the Islamic provisional government had appointed a prime minister at that time by expelling Shahpur Bakhtiar and had Mehdi Barzagan as the prime minister of Iran at that time. And Ayatollah Khomeini was the supreme leader. And in the following months, there was a rigged referendum to declare the country as an Islamic republic as per the concept of the Velaya Faqih. So now she says about how he had to get back to Zahedan. So in this, she says, my father boarded a flight to Zahedan where he shouted, Marg bar America, death to America, with his former patients. He returned only a few months before the American embassy was taken hostage by revolutionaries in 1979. So in the end, she mentions about her personal experiences about Iran after she left. Iran seemed like a dream as we settled back into an Indian school. The Iran of our times faded rapidly. Gurus stopped giving public performances. After women were banned from singing solo in public, the Shah died in exile in 1980 and his family was dodged in tragedy, two of his children committing suicide. The Indian population of Zahedan dwindled as many Sikhs decided to move elsewhere. But until my father's death, he remembered his Iranian days as amongst the most satisfying of his life, helping the children of the poorest of poor, nomadic Kurds, immigrant Pakistanis, Sikh laborers. In times to come, making 10 times more money in state-of-the-art hospitals, he would remember those days wistfully. They listened to me, followed my instructions far better than their highly educated counterparts, my father would say. I was proud to be the wife of a doctor. We were so respected everywhere we went, says my mother. So, this was her experience of being in Iran during the 70s. Even to this day, the Shah of Iran was still remembered even now by everyone. Here I want to do a little clarification on the children of the Shah of Iran. The Shah had 5 children. So his first child was Princess Shahnaz, born to him and his first wife, Princess Fauzia of Egypt. And after he divorced Princess Fauzia of Egypt, he had married Soraya Esfayandri. But with Soraya Esfayandri, he did not have any children. So hence, due to the pressure from the royal court, he divorced Soraya Esfayandri. So Farah Diba was his third wife, Empress Farah Pahlavi Shah Banu of Iran. With Farah, he had 4 children, the eldest being Reza Pahlavi, and second daughter Farah Naz Pahlavi, and then Ali Reza Pahlavi and Laila Pahlavi. So Ali Reza Pahlavi and Laila Pahlavi passed away in 2001 and 2011. Under the rule of Shah, he did many reforms, especially the White Revolution in the 1960s, which had more land reforms, voting rights to women, and the literacy corps. So in this point, Khomeini apparently protested for all these things, and he claimed what the Shah was doing was un-Islamic. And because of this, the Shah exiled him off to Iraq in the 60s itself. I hope you like this episode. That I would like to even give my sincere thanks to Dr. Kavita Rao to contributing this article for me to do this episode. So thank you very much, Dr. Kavita Rao. Please do like, share, subscribe the Hashbrown Traveler.